Welcome to the Vet Med Wellness and Leadership Podcast, where we discuss central challenges vet med leaders face, such as burnout, stress, and difficult interactions with clients and staff, just to name a few. In each episode, you will hear about actionable solutions that you can apply to your practice and invitations to connect with fellow leaders who are passionate about improving the wellness of the vet med profession. By subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing this podcast, you are helping more veterinary professionals find the resources shared in these episodes. Thank you in advance for listening and supporting this show. I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, hey everybody, Crystal Stokes here, and today we have a special episode where we're going to be focusing on the topic of disability as a veterinary doctor and student. My guest today is actually a previous guest, Dr. Christina Kaye, and she's studying to be a veterinary ophthalmologist in Florida. She also has a really strong interest in exotic animal medicine, and in her home life, she has an amazing cat as well as 3 different types of reptiles. So Dr. Kaye, I really appreciate you being back today and spending some time with us to talk about this topic that often doesn't get much attention, disability in veterinary medicine. And I wonder if we could start off with the beginning of the journey in veterinary medicine, which is vet school and disability in vet school, and your thoughts on that. Maybe a little intro too of your background with that.
So I have always had accommodations growing up. I have congenital things, and I've just always needed a little extra help. And I want students, of all ages, vet school or otherwise, to know there's no shame in asking for a little help. If that's what you need to be, quote unquote, equal to your peers, that's what you need. I think it's really important for students, even applying to vet school, to know that nowadays they even consider, having testing anxiety a disability. That can get you even, some extra time on exams. I think the first step that you need to know about in terms of, you need to sit down with yourself and say, hey, is this something I can benefit from? And if so, there's some investigating you need to do on your part to kind of get those accommodations per se. So, for example, my accommodations were mainly for visual things because I have a lot of congenital visual anomalies. So, for example, I got a letter from my ophthalmologist saying, hey, Christina, she sees me for the care, for ophthalmology. And, she does require things like 14-point font on exams, or she requires extra time. Things like that. And then you have to talk to these universities, even when you're applying, and say, how does somebody go about receiving accommodations? Who's the necessary people that they need to talk to? Because sometimes I know at my school, it was a university-wide process. It wasn't so much, hey, this is the person within the vet school. So you need to talk to them beforehand. Sometimes that's not an easy task. You don't really want to disclose things like that. But you can be as vague or as specific as you want to be and just say, hey, I need a little help with school. Who do I talk to about accommodations? And that's kind of the lingo. The word accommodations, it means, hey, I need just a little extra assistance, whether it's with, do you have a physical disability that you need, wheelchair access, or if your school has elevators, things like that. Or, I need a little extra time on a test. So they're 2 totally different spectrums, but, the goal is you want to be on the same level as your peers. So you want to be able to succeed in vet school just as well as your peers do.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was doing some research for this topic, and I typed in a variety of key phrases like disability, accommodations, vet school. And what I noticed is that some vet schools pop up right away with a page that's dedicated to that, how you can receive services and accommodations for both mental and physical limitations to, again, like level of playing field is often the language that's used.
Right.
And even looking at, there were some really great stories showcasing veterinarians who have a variety of disabilities who have had thriving careers and how they went about receiving those accommodations. like you mentioned, somebody being in a wheelchair. So how would they get around with some of the vet school activities, such as having to walk beside a horse and watch its gait? And how can they adjust that particular skill that they need to learn to accommodate for somebody who may not be as mobile? And I thought there were some really good examples given. So for a student or somebody who's not yet a student, they might be on the verge of applying to schools. It sounds like you're advocating for them to contact the schools directly beforehand and kind of do some investigation and make sure that they have the kind of accommodations that you feel would be beneficial.
Yeah, because, there's schools that, schools are going to do things differently in terms of how they accommodate you. At the end of the day, they're going to figure out a way to accommodate you, but you want to know what's going to best fit you. So, for example, my undergraduate program, they had me taking exams on different campuses, and that was not very accommodating because you had no access to the professor if you had questions. So that was something that I found very difficult during my undergraduate career. Whereas in vet school, one of my accommodations has to be in a very quiet environment, paper-based exams, has to be this type of font, things of that nature. And they pretty much had all the students with accommodations in a separate room, very quiet. You can always have access to questions. Professors, even some professors at my vet school would kind of come in, pop in and say, "Hey guys, how you doing? Do you have any questions? If so, are your classes taking it down the hall?" Things like that. Now of course, not every program is perfect. So you just kind of have to figure out which one is going to work best for you. And, a lot of people, it's a learning curve. People are just used to the norm where, kids sit down, they take a test is over, end of story. Whereas you come out and you said, "Hey, I need extra time," professors, staff, sometimes it's a learning curve even on their end. I know with the vet school that I attended, it was definitely a learning curve, and I actually helped them kind of shape how it, I don't want to say should be run, but I just kind of gave them pointers. I sat down with a dean, I sat down with the people that were kind of in charge, and I said, "Hey, these are things that I recommend that we improve on to make it a better testing environment, or, how can we educate professors?" Because sometimes professors don't know. Professors sometimes just get this piece of paper and they're told to sign it. So I think it starts with you and knowing what you need, and then again, having just that discussion with the university, the appropriate people.
Mm. I remember back when I was an undergraduate, I had a friend who she was having difficulty with test anxiety, primarily just with the noise being in like a large lecture hall, and everybody like turning their pages. And some people would finish really fast and get up and leave. And I think it just exacerbated her anxiety. And I remember she got the accommodation to take the test in a quiet room by herself, but nothing else was different. The duration of time was the same. The actual test was exactly the same. And her grades just improved dramatically. I thought that was really interesting. Because again, as an undergraduate, I didn't know anything about accommodations. I had never heard of test anxiety. And to see what a difference it made for her, that she had all the knowledge. She had the ability to test well, but when she was in that environment, something in her just started to panic and she couldn't focus anymore on the actual test in front of her. So all that knowledge was gone, and then she'd get a bad grade. But it wasn't really, a good representation of her abilities.
Right. No. And I think, like I said, it starts with you. What do you think you need assistance with? Like for me, again, I have to have paper-based tests, and sometimes you can't always have that. But, in my vet school, I always had paper-based tests, whether they wanted me to or not. It was part of my paperwork. And it's crazy how people just improve. It just didn't, it's really something that's extraordinary. And I mean, I also think that a lot of times students don't want to have accommodations because of their peers, for example. Again, I've had all this stuff my whole life, and you had students saying, "Why do you have to take tests in different rooms? Why do you get extra time?" And you know what? That you don't have to disclose that to anybody. You don't have to tell anybody. You could just say, "Hey, I'll see you later after the test. We can talk about the test after if you want, but you don't really have to tell anybody, and you shouldn't feel bad for needing extra help to feel, at the same level as your peers." And I think that's also something that students of all ages, vet school or otherwise, do need to kind of understand as well.
I appreciate you bringing that in, and I'll speak too as a psychotherapist that I'm very appreciative of how I feel like year after year we become more accepting and more open about disabilities around mental health and providing accommodations for that too. And I've just loved to see that change about how people feel more confident and comfortable coming forward and saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with this right now," whether it's as a student or in their working environment, and ask for that kind of support. And we're getting better at providing it. That's also really nice because before we were terrible at providing support for anything psychological. And I think that that's improving. So I do like to bring up the kind of stigma and the difficulty that one can feel, whether it's with their peers or with other people, and that it's a personal decision about how much you disclose. You don't have to disclose anything if you want to. You still deserve to have the support. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no matter what your disability is, physical, mental, if it's going to make you succeed, who cares? Who cares what other people think?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I eventually wound up looking at it. Because for a while, you do feel like an outsider. You do feel like an outcast, especially, at such a young age, you're at this such impressionable age. And then all of a sudden you have kids, asking you, why do you have to leave? Like, how come you never take tests with us? Or how come, you get special arrangements? At a young age, you're like, I just do, I need them, and you feel like, why is somebody asking me all these questions? And then as you get older, you're just like, hey, I need them. They help me succeed. That's all you need to know.
Yeah. It feels so simple, doesn't it? Like I think about you mentioned vision, difficulty of vision, and saying, well, I have to wear glasses. That's okay now. You can wear glasses and nobody thinks twice about it. But I bet when people first started wearing glasses, that was different. That might have made somebody an outsider. So it's all this matter of perspective. And I can definitely imagine that some people listening to this might think, oh, this isn't fair. This doesn't level the playing field. This gives people a leg up. Just tough it out. No, nobody shows special accommodations. And I know that there are arguments for that. And I would say just educate yourself. I think that it's better to go into these conversations with a curious mind and to do some research, read, and go on Google Scholar. Don't just go on Google. Try Google Scholar and try to really be informed in this discussion and formulate your own opinion. Because I do think this can be something that gets people rather hot under the collar.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I've definitely experienced that myself where, I would have students say to me, I'm going to get accommodations because, I want to be able to take time and a half to take a test. And I was like, do you think I want to sit there for, you have 45 minutes to take a test? Do you think I want to sit there for 90 minutes or 70 minutes? I need those 70 to 90 minutes, when you get time and after double time. I have me a double time. You think I want to sit there and, because sometimes extra time can be a detriment too, because you sit there and you second guess, especially if you have anxiety and you sit there and you overthink, you just tell people, this is what I need, you can't tell somebody that's not what they need, you know what I mean? But like when you'd have people say, oh, you don't need that. It's like, you don't know me. You don't know my accommodations. You don't know my disability. When people would say, oh, maybe I should get that. I said, you know what? Maybe you should look into getting that. You may qualify. You never know. But instead of putting the other person down and saying, well, I'm saying it out of spite, that's where I kind of think, that's where we kind of butt heads a bit. And I don't think that's fair because it makes the person that does need the accommodations feel less of a person.
Yes. And what I appreciate you're bringing in too is qualification. Okay. You can't just say, hey, I'd like extra time. and get it. There are steps you need to take. And we should kind of weave this in, but let's shift into getting accommodations as a working professional. Let's say you've made it through vet school. Awesome. Now you're entering the workforce. This is where I guess I could go ahead and just bring in Title I of the ADA. This is a resource. You can go online. There's a lot out there for both employees and employers. Title I of the ADA, it does require employers with over 15 employees to provide qualified individuals with disabilities an equal opportunity to benefit from a full range of employment-related opportunities available to others. And they give guidance such as things that you are not allowed to ask in a job interview, and how to provide the right kind of accommodations. And like I said in the very beginning, Title I is a requirement for employers of over 15, but it's also recommended that all employers have these practices in the workplace. And there are also lots of resources that can guide individuals, employees, around how to get testing and the forms to take to their doctor. It has to be filled out to bring back to their employer. There's forms for the employer to fill out. There's forms for the employee to fill out so that everything is documented and we can check in and make sure the person qualifies for accommodations, the right accommodations are being delivered, that everything is working effectively, and to tweak it as needed. So I'd love for you to talk more about that and how people can even start that process of figuring out, how do I even know what kind of accommodations I need? Like, what kind of practitioner should I see to find out?
So I definitely think it's worth. So if you're interested in, let's say, Vet Clinic A, so you talk to Vet Clinic A and you say, hey, who's in charge of your accommodations, whether that's your practice manager or your HR person, and say, hey, can you connect me with them so that they can tell me, especially with corporate like Blue Pearl, Pet Vet, things like that, they have HR people. And so it's really important to talk to them because they know about ADA. They can tell you this is what they need. And you can even tell them, this is what I need. I had a meeting with an HR department when I first started out, and I said, I need magnification. So they went out and they purchased, I think it's called like an Optivisor. So it assists with magnification, even if it was for something as simple as filling a syringe with a medication, because you have those little ticks that are really tiny, right? And that was super helpful. Labels, they had labels with larger fonts. And you know what? It wound up helping out not just me, other people, that didn't realize, hey, this is super helpful. Instead of having these little labels that say controlled drugs on them, they're bigger. Everybody can see them. There was less mistakes in the hospital. It's great for patient safety, things like that. So it was nice to see that play out in that aspect. But I think honestly, every practice should have some form of an HR department that's very familiar with those kinds of. And I think that's where you should start as well. Or even, talking to your primary care physician. That's also a really good place to start too. Just to kind of say, hey, for example, I'm a vet tech. I have a back problem. What are some things that you can think of that could help me in the workplace? Yeah. Things like that.
That's fabulous. I also know that for those who maybe, I'm thinking more on the mental health side, let's say, you feel like you're struggling, you're not really sure of exactly what you need, or maybe you don't even have a diagnosis at this point, then I would say, meeting with a psychiatrist or a psychologist that can provide testing can be a good way. Sometimes you have to go to your GP first. You might need to get a referral depending on your insurance, but psychological testing can really help you narrow down the scope of what it is that's really causing you the most distress. And then they can help language for you what kind of accommodations would be most helpful and help you with the documentation and forms for your employer.
Yeah, and it's very similar to when you're a kid and you have what's called an IEP, an individual education plan. So you do have to go through all these tests, and you do have to basically make a file that says, hey, I'm Christina Kaye. I have this issue, this issue, this issue, and these are how I can be helped. Whether it's you might have somebody in your workforce that has dyslexia. How can we help them? Things like that. I think it's very important for those aspects of psychologists and for psychiatrists as well to kind of pitch in all fields, not just vet medicine, whether it's a corporation and, you could seek it out. In other words, so if a corporation like Blue Pearl has a psychologist or a psychiatrist on staff and you don't know where to start, maybe they can help you as opposed to you going out and seeking it by yourself.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. So that's one of the benefits is that oftentimes the larger hospitals do have more resources. They might have a really robust HR department. They might already have a lot of mental health resources and also physical accommodations already baked in. So starting, like you said, you start with the HR department or ask the hospital that you're considering working for. I also really like, Dr. Kaye, how you're really good about promoting people doing their research beforehand. Like, don't just jump into a job and then find out as you're in that interview process. So you're thinking, maybe I want to work for hospital A or hospital B. Do your research and really ask questions. And I remember this was a theme on the previous podcast when we were chatting, that you were also pointing out that it's important to dig deep. Don't just take a superficial answer. If they say, yeah, we have HR, they'll take care of you. That's not a good answer. You need to get details. You're like, who specifically will I be talking to? And can you send me email me information, like some documentation that shows me what exactly do you mean by accommodations? Because one thing, just verbally have them say they have it, then you now are accepting a job offer and working for a company only to find out that the benefits weren't really there. So make sure you read the fine print, you get stuff in writing, you read through everything, and do your due diligence. That's really important.
And I think another point, not to go off topic, but another point to definitely hammer home is make sure you also know your rights with ADA, whether you're a student or an employee. Because, for example, if you're a vet student and you have an exam in front of you and it's not up to your accommodations and you take that exam and you fail that exam, you can't have a do-over. But it is your legal right to say, hey, so-and-so, this exam is not up to my accommodations. I am refusing to take this exam. You can say that. You can, and I've had to do that several times. Because I'm not going to get a failing grade because yes, you have testing anxiety. Yes, you have all these things and you're like, I just want to get it over with. But you really have to sit down with yourself and say, no, because if I take this test and I fail this test, it's my own fault. So I think that just kind of going back to the vet student side, not to, kind of jumble things up a bit, but I think that's super, super important. And you have to really advocate for yourself, even at the workplace. If you don't want to disclose you have a disability and, something happens at work and then all of a sudden you're like, well, I have this disability. Yes, they'll correct it. Yes, they'll do whatever they need to do to fix it. But at the end of the day, you need to be aware that it's okay to be different. It's okay to have special accommodations. It's okay to tell somebody you need help, but it's also okay to say, this is my right. This is what I need. If you can't abide by it, I don't want to work for you. I don't want to take the test. I don't want to go to your vet school, things like that.
You really have a strength in how you advocate for yourself. And it sounds like you're mentoring the people that are seeking out this advice to go slow and do what is really right for you, and to not just be reactive in the moment, but do your research, know your rights. So it's go on, look up the ADA, read about your rights, and go in with that knowledge beforehand. Another resource I'd like to give to people is called askjan.org. And this stands for, Jan, the Job Accommodation Network. And so they provide free, expert, and confidential guidance on job accommodations and disability employment issues. So they provide help to individuals, employers, family members, and even medical professionals. So it's really robust website with a lot of free information. They even have a commonly asked questions area that I think many people will find is a good starting point. I also like that they have a lot of the documentation just right there that people might need. So They have the request for accommodation for employees. They have the request for disability related information, which is for the employee's doctor. They also have approval or denial of accommodations. That's for the practice. And they have a monitoring implemented accommodations, which is also for the practice. So just like a real great area to start if you're feeling kind of lost. That resource may be an easy access to a lot of information.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I've been on that website a couple of times just to kind of see what I need to do in places that I work for that aren't corporate, that may not have a well developed HR department, just so that I can, cover all my bases as well. Because it's really a really good resource, especially the frequently asked questions, especially like you said, if you don't know where to start or you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. And I'll link that up in the show notes. As we're bringing this down the home stretch, were there any other points that you wanted to make or any other resources that you would like to share?
Definitely for your fourth year vet students that need accommodations, I just want to point out the NAVLE, that National State Licensing Exam. They do provide accommodations for you. And you just have to, I think it's the ICVA that still puts that test out. And there is on their website a link that, discusses accommodations. You just have to provide them, necessary documentation saying, hey, I've had this accommodation in vet school, because they do prefer to see that you've had this before in vet school. And I think that's really important, because why would you not want accommodations on a test that's going to determine whether or not you can practice as a veterinarian, And I found out not many people know about that. And so I think that's definitely a really good point for my fourth year vet student listeners out there, or even veterinarians that know fourth years that are taking an AVLE. You never know who this podcast is going to reach. So I always kind of throw that out there. And then definitely, of course, advocate for yourself, because, at the end of the day, no one's going to do it for you. You have to really, if you want to succeed, sometimes you just have that's one of the things I contribute my success to, for sure, is advocating for myself. I think it's really important, for you to recognize, I need help. I'm going to get the help. Physical, mental disability doesn't matter. I don't even like to say it kind of makes you level with your peers. It's more so what you need to make yourself succeed. I think that's definitely the drive home point for this conversation.
I really appreciate that. Focus on yourself, know what you need, and go after it and be persistent. Yeah. And also, so that people don't feel so alone, there's some other great resources out there. I know that you had mentioned to me before, the disableddvm.com. Can you speak more to that website, and we'll link it up in the show notes?
Oh, she's awesome. I believe she is a fourth year veterinary student. And she's very open about, I believe she suffers from chronic illness. She had a lot of things happen to her during her vet school career that she didn't even think she was going to wind up going back to vet school. And I mean, I follow her and I see all her amazing posts about, fourth year and clinicals. And it's really inspiring to see, somebody that's been through everything that also, had some form of challenge or disability, because people don't even think chronic illness is a disability. It definitely is. You have to battle that stuff every day, and you need accommodations just to get through the day. I really like her website, her Instagram. She's super motivational, super upbeat, supportive. And it's definitely something that students, even employees, should definitely look into, just to kind of educate themselves.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll link that one up. And the other one was doctorswithdisabilities.org. Can you tell us more about it?
So I know there's also a podcast that focuses more on like medical professionals, not so much veterinarians, but it's just like a really inspiring thing to see people's stories. You always have the surgeon that operates with no hands, and seeing how people accommodate them. Again, I don't really like talking about myself, but I want to be a veterinary ophthalmologist. I mean, I have a visual impairment, the idea of helping animals see again, because I can't really see out of one eye, there's just something about that that's kind of wholesome and also inspiring to people. So I really enjoy that.
Yes. Those are great areas of and research. They give you a lot of information. They also help you feel connected, just to hear of others that are facing challenges and how they're getting through it, how they're maintaining positivity and finding really interesting solutions of ways to do what they're passionate about. So, Dr. Kaye, I just really appreciate your willingness to come on today to share some of your personal story and to give people out there that may be struggling with this some guidance about their next steps to take, whether they're students in vet school or they're already out in the work world. I think these will be some great resources for people to dive into. I really appreciate your time today. It's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. And of course, if anybody, if they have any questions or anything, they're more than welcome to reach out to me if you want to put my contact info in the show notes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which one would you like for me to include in this one? I'll put it in the show notes.
Definitely my email. You can put my LinkedIn as well. I check my email all the time. That's the price of being on call, as well as my LinkedIn, things like that. So for sure, you can certainly give out that contact information.
Okay, I will do that. So I'll pull that from the previous episode, and definitely encourage everybody to reach out if you have any questions. Dr. Kaye is really accessible and happy to talk about these things. And Dr. Kaye, I really appreciate you being on. I look forward to next time. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.